The most powerful people follow this rule, and you should too. Let's start with a question that might make you uncomfortable. How much of your life is controlled by other people's opinions? Think about it. The way you dress, the way you speak, the career you chose, the things you post online. How many of those decisions were truly yours, and how many were shaped by a fear, sometimes subtle, sometimes overwhelming, of what others might think? We like to believe we're independent thinkers, that we forge our own path, but the truth is, most people live their lives trapped inside an invisible prison. A prison built from expectations, social norms, and a desperate need for validation. But here's the brutal reality: the most powerful, successful, and influential people in history, those who truly changed the world, followed a completely different rule. They refused to let the opinions of others dictate their lives. And if you want to reach your full potential, you need to understand why caring too much about what people think is one of the most destructive forces in your life. Because the moment you stop living for approval, you unlock something far greater: freedom, clarity, and a level of personal power that most people will never experience. Throughout history, some of the most successful, influential, and wise people have understood this truth. They have seen their failures not as dead ends, but as detours, their setbacks not as punishments, but as redirections. Think about Steve Jobs, who was fired from his own company, only to come back years later and create one of the greatest technological revolutions of our time. Think about J.K. Rowling, who was rejected by 12 different publishers before her books became a global phenomenon. Think about every great thinker, entrepreneur, artist, and leader who faced moments where the world told them, this is the end, and yet, those moments were just the beginning.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
The answer is simple: evolution wired us this way. Thousands of years ago, being accepted by the tribe wasn't just a matter of self-esteem, it was a matter of survival. If you were rejected, cast out, or seen as strange, your chances of survival plummeted. The human brain adapted to make social approval feel like life or death. And even though we live in a world where you won't starve just because someone disapproves of you, that ancient wiring is still inside us, controlling our emotions, making us anxious about judgment, forcing us to conform. But here's where the real danger lies: in a world where success, creativity, and innovation require standing out, that same instinct that once protected us now holds us back. Imagine if history's greatest minds had cared what people thought. If Socrates had feared public opinion, he never would have asked the dangerous questions that laid the foundation for Western philosophy. If Nikola Tesla had sought validation, he never would have pushed forward with ideas that seemed too radical in his time. If Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, or any other visionary had played it safe, following the crowd instead of their own convictions, they would have been forgotten. The uncomfortable truth is this: every person who has ever done something truly great has been criticized. Every revolutionary idea was mocked before it was accepted. Every leader who changed the world was doubted, ridiculed, or even hated. So the question is, if you care too much about what people think, how can you ever expect to do something meaningful? But here's the paradox. We don't just fear judgment, we also crave approval. The likes, the followers, the applause. Social media has turned validation into a drug, and most people are hopelessly addicted. But the hidden cost of that addiction is enormous. You start living for an audience instead of yourself. You start making decisions based not on what excites you, but on what will impress others. And worst of all, you start shaping your identity around external validation rather than internal conviction. But the moment you recognize this, you gain a choice. Do you want to live for approval, or do you want to live for something real? Here's where most people struggle. They think that if they stop caring about what people think, they'll become cold, arrogant, or disconnected. But that's not what this is about. This isn't about ignoring feedback or refusing to learn from others. It's about knowing the difference between constructive criticism and meaningless noise. It's about understanding that opinions are cheap, and most of the time, the people judging you don't even have their own lives figured out. Think about the last time someone criticized you. Were they someone whose life you actually admire? Were they someone who has achieved what you want to achieve? Or were they just another person projecting their own fears and insecurities onto you? Here's the truth: people will judge you no matter what. If you play it safe, they'll say you're boring. If you take risks, they'll say you're reckless. If you succeed, they'll say you got lucky. If you fail, they'll say they saw it coming. So if judgment is inevitable, why not do what actually matters to you? The most powerful people in history understood this. They refused to be controlled by the opinions of others, and in doing so, they became unstoppable. And you can too. But first, you have to ask yourself a terrifying question: who would you be if you weren't afraid of judgment? The invisible chains how fear of judgment silently controls your life. Most people don't realize they are prisoners. Not in the traditional sense: no bars, no guards, no locked doors. Yet, every day they wake up and step into a mental cage built not by force, but by fear. Fear of standing out, fear of being criticized, fear of being rejected. And so they adjust. They shrink their dreams. They censor their thoughts. They become smaller versions of themselves, all to avoid the discomfort of judgment. But here's the tragic part: this prison has no real walls. The door has been unlocked the entire time, and yet most people will never walk through it. Why? Because fear of judgment is one of the most powerful psychological forces in the human mind. It shapes behavior in ways we rarely notice. It dictates what risks we take, what conversations we avoid, what parts of ourselves we hide from the world. It makes us hesitate before posting something online, before speaking up in a meeting, before making a life-changing decision. It convinces us to conform, not because we believe in what we're conforming to, but because the thought of rejection feels unbearable. And so, we trade our authenticity for approval. We trade our uniqueness for safety. But at what cost? Imagine living your entire life carefully managing perceptions, only to reach the end and realize that none of it mattered. That the people whose approval you sought barely thought about you. That the judgments you feared were temporary and insignificant. That the opinions you let control your life were from people who were just as lost, just as insecure, just as uncertain as you were. This is the great illusion: the belief that everyone is watching, when in reality, most people are too consumed with their own worries to care about yours. And even if they do judge you, what then? A moment of criticism, a fleeting remark. Is that really worth sacrificing your potential, your happiness, your freedom? Philosophers throughout history have warned us about this invisible prison. The Stoics, in particular, understood that true power comes from within, not from external validation. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the greatest philosophers of all time, said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Think about that. If you want to grow, if you want to build something extraordinary, if you want to be truly free, you must be willing to be misunderstood. You must accept that people will doubt you, that they will question your choices, that they will laugh before they applaud." And yet, most people are not willing to endure that discomfort. They would rather stay in the prison of approval than risk being seen as foolish, even for a moment. But what if the greatest mistake is not being judged, it's never being judged at all? What if the real danger is not failure, but blending in so perfectly that you never leave a mark on the world. The truth is, the people who are never criticized are the ones who never take risks. They live quiet, forgettable lives, avoiding discomfort at all costs. But the people who change the world, the innovators, the artists, the leaders, the revolutionaries, are the ones who dared to be seen, even when it was uncomfortable. They understood that being judged is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're doing something real. And here's where things get even more interesting. The moment you stop caring about what people think, something incredible happens. You gain an unfair advantage. While others hesitate, you take action. While others seek approval, you seek progress. While others waste energy managing perceptions, you invest your energy into becoming unstoppable. Most people live their lives playing defense, trying to avoid criticism, trying to maintain an image. But the most powerful people play offense. They don't wait for permission. They don't seek validation. They move forward with such conviction that the world has no choice but to take notice. This is why the fear of judgment is the ultimate test. Not because overcoming it is easy, but because doing so separates those who live freely from those who remain trapped. And the irony, the moment you stop caring so much about what people think, they actually start respecting you more. Confidence is magnetic. Authenticity is rare. When you own who you are without apology, people sense it. They may not always like it, but they respect it. And the few who don't, they were never meant to be part of your journey anyway. So, ask yourself, where in your life have you allowed the fear of judgment to hold you back? What dreams have you postponed? What ideas have you silenced? What risks have you avoided, not because they were impossible, but because you worried about what people might say? And more importantly, what would your life look like if you finally decided to break free? The answer to that question could change everything. The power of indifference, how letting go of approval gives you ultimate freedom. Imagine waking up tomorrow with a mind completely free from the weight of other people's opinions. No hesitation before speaking your truth. No second guessing your decisions. No shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Just pure, unshakable clarity, acting, thinking, and creating without the constant noise of external validation. Can you picture how powerful that would be? How much time, energy, and mental space would you reclaim? This isn't just a fantasy. It's a reality that the most powerful people throughout history have mastered. And it all comes down to one thing: indifference to approval. At first, that word indifference might sound cold, even harsh. But true indifference to approval isn't about rejecting people or refusing to connect. It's about understanding that external validation is an unreliable currency. It fluctuates. It is inconsistent. It is driven by trends, emotions, and the ever-changing opinions of people who are just as uncertain as you are. To build a life of freedom, you must detach from it. You must recognize that the praise of others is as fleeting as their criticism, that the same people who celebrate you today might doubt you tomorrow, that if your confidence is built on approval, it will crumble the moment that approval disappears. Real confidence, the kind that makes you unstoppable, comes from within, from a foundation that no opinion can shake. Think about how much of your life has been shaped by the invisible pressure to conform. The way you dress, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself. Most people don't even realize they are performing, subtly adjusting themselves to fit into the expectations of their peers, their family, their culture. But what if you stripped all of that away? What if you started making decisions based purely on what you truly wanted, rather than what you thought would be accepted? Would your life look the same, or would it be radically different? The ancient philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner. This is the paradox. When you crave approval, you give others control over you. You become dependent on their opinions, their reactions, their validation. But when you let go, when you stop chasing approval and start living by your own standards, something extraordinary happens. You become untouchable. Not in the sense that you never feel pain or doubt, but in the sense that external judgment no longer dictates your choices. You become the kind of person who walks into a room and commands respect not because you seek it, but because you no longer need it. And here's the irony: the less you need approval, the more you tend to get it. People are drawn to confidence, to authenticity, to those who carry themselves with a quiet, unshakable certainty. The greatest leaders in history didn't rise to power by begging for validation. They did it by believing in something so deeply that the world had no choice but to take notice. And you have that same potential, but only if you're willing to let go of the fear that holds most people back, the fear of being misunderstood, of being criticized, of standing alone. So, ask yourself, what would your life look like if you stopped chasing approval? If you stopped trying to impress and started trying to express yourself? If you stopped waiting for permission and started living as if you already had it? The answer to that question might just change everything. Unshackled, the life that awaits when you stop seeking permission. There is a version of you that exists beyond fear. A version untouched by hesitation, unburdened by the weight of judgment, unafraid to take up space in the world. This version of you is not a fantasy. It is not some unreachable ideal. It is simply the person you become when you stop waiting for permission to be who you are. Because that's what most people do. They wait. They wait for society to approve of their dreams. They wait for friends and family to validate their choices. They wait for a sign, a guarantee, a moment where everything feels safe. But that moment never comes. Because the world does not grant permission to those who wait. It only rewards those who decide. Imagine stepping fully into your life with no need for validation. Imagine pursuing ideas without wondering if they'll be accepted, speaking your truth without softening it for the comfort of others, making choices based on your own convictions rather than external expectations. This is what true power looks like: not control over others, not fame or wealth, but absolute sovereignty over yourself. The ability to move through life without being tethered to the shifting tides of opinion. To act not because it is expected, but because it is right. To create not for applause, but for the sheer necessity of expression. And when you reach this state, something incredible happens. You become truly free. Free to fail, because failure no longer defines you. Free to succeed, because success is no longer measured by approval. Free to evolve, because you no longer cling to an identity shaped by other people's perceptions. The great irony is that most people spend their lives chasing freedom but never achieve it, because they are unwilling to let go of the very thing that enslaves them: their need to be liked, to be understood, to be accepted. But the moment you let go, the moment you stop giving power to opinions that do not serve you, you step into a life that is fully your own. So the final question is this: are you ready? Are you ready to stop living for the expectations of others? Are you ready to stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you? Are you ready to walk away from the invisible prison that has kept you small? Because the door has been open this entire time. The only thing left to do is step through it. And when you do, you will realize something profound: the world was never holding you back. You were, but not anymore. This is your life. Live it without apology.